Well, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you, Adam.
All right, great. Well, thank you for joining us this morning for this group discussion to talk about the options that have been developed as an outcome of some of the stakeholder interviews that we've held to date. Again, we've talked to about 40 stakeholders within the community, and these options that will be presented represent kind of the visualization of those conversations. And we wanted to preface this by saying that, these alternatives, there's nothing that has been predetermined at this point. These are really frameworks for discussion purposes. And the process from here is to gather input from these small group meetings. We'll have another one later this afternoon at 2 o'clock. And then we'll have a wrap-up session starting at 5:30 today through up to 7 o'clock. And we will kind of debrief the community on the input and feedback that we've received and give, I think, a good sense of where we're going to be heading, taking into account and consideration that feedback and developing a preferred alternative. And then from there, we'll present that preferred alternative again to the community, solicit comments and feedback, and refine it and deliver a final product. So we are very appreciative of your time today and your willingness to participate in this process. We're excited to hear your input and feedback on the options that have been developed. And with that, I will turn the time over to Mike Dowling with Dowling Architects, who will present and walk through the different options that have been visualized. So with that, Mike, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thanks, Adam. Do you want to maybe quickly talk about procedure for raising hand and chatting and stuff like that real quick?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So if you do have a comment, there are two ways in which you can do it. One is if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a chat icon. If you click on that, you can type a question or a comment into the chat down at the bottom. There should be the opportunity to raise your hand and ask a verbal question as well, in which case we'll be looking at the chat and the participant screen and calling on individuals that have raised their hand to address questions and comments as we go through this presentation. So just keep in mind, this is very conversational, and we would love to hear comments and input as we go through and explain these concepts.
All right, well, what I'm going to do is go through the project area and walk through the couple of options that we've been exploring for Cruse Avenue right now. And then I'll kind of do a synopsis of sort of the two options, and then a hybrid scheme, which is a combination of the two together. And then at that point, we will open it up to question, answer, discussion, chatting, things like that. So if you can see my screen, this is just an overall slide showing the project area, starting at the south end, which is the left side of your screen. The right side is to the north. The bottom of the screen is east, and the top is west. So where Park Avenue and Cruse meet, it's kind of the beginning of our project area. And it ends at Lawrence Street. So it's this section of Cruse, which is the majority of Cruse. The area from Lawrence to Mini Malfunction Junction has been excluded simply because of the complexity of the junction itself. And that's probably would consume all of our time if we just focused on that. All right, so we'll start on the south end. And the first sort of scheme that we were looking at, or option, we're calling a narrowed street option. Basically, I'll go back a little bit. Cruse Avenue is about 65 feet in width. both in the right of way that is allocated for Cruse, as well as the actual paved asphalt surface. So unlike a lot of city streets where you might have a 60 or 70-foot right of way, it's not uncommon for part of that to be landscape boulevards with sidewalks on either side, and the actual street is considerably less than that 60 or 70 feet. Cruse Avenue, on the other hand, is asphalt from edge to edge. And there are a few areas, in particular, the area to the south where Cruse kind of splits to meet Park. It's very wide. Haven't measured it, but it could be 200 feet or so. And then there's an area where Cutler Street comes in, where Cutler is split, and it branches off to Cruse to the right and down to the left, and was really designed to accommodate a lot more traffic than what it sees. So the narrowed street idea is basically taking that 65 feet of right of way and utilizing 40 of it for the street and parking, leaving us about 25 feet on either side, one or the other, or 12.5 feet on each side, that can be reused for walkways, green space, bicycle paths, kind of whatever we really feel like is best use of that. So this street section that this diagram shows is a 40-foot wide street, 2 12-foot drive lanes, and then 8 feet along either side, which would accommodate parallel parking along the entire street. A couple of sort of just consistent graphical things that we did in all of these slides. This sort of dark gray line is a bicycle path, and that's consistent in all of them. The tannish orange would be pedestrian, sidewalk, or plaza spaces. The darker red are new rooftops. So on this slide, for example, on the south end, where we've got that really wide section of right-of-way, we can put some housing. And so the goal that was identified in the downtown master plan was to try to provide opportunities for additional housing in the downtown that would be sort of urban transitional type of housing. Didn't identify what type that would be, although in our conversations with stakeholders, there was a lot of discussion about the cost and affordability of the types of housing that might be available. And so by contrast, we're showing wood frame 2-story townhouse types of units that could be connected with shared party walls. This is probably one of the most affordable types of housing to build. It would be market rate, so it's not subsidized or low income in this case, but would be purchased by presumably young urban professionals or first-time home buyers that work in the downtown or want to be near the downtown. By contrast, a 3 or 4-story multi-unit apartment building, the cost of that construction becomes considerably higher. And as we're starting to see with some other developers that are proposing those types of buildings, you get into above market rate types of units that really is kind of in conflict with what the goals of the plan were. So we're typically trying to show townhouse style units. So that's what we see here. There's about 10 located in this area. And we have the pedestrian path that utilizes the extra 25 feet. And so there's opportunity to have seating areas with trees. It's all city park to the east. And so that 25 feet actually sort of backs up to green space that's hilly, but is still green space. So then when we get over to where Cutler intersects, we actually have quite a bit of right-of-way that is not needed for Cruse Avenue as well. And so this intersection of Cutler and Cruse gets tightened up and enhances pedestrian crossing by narrowing up and having bulked out intersections so that the crossing is only 24 feet in any direction. And then there'd be sidewalks along Cutler that go up to Warren Street. And so then this there's a triangular section of property that ultimately would become available for redevelopment. And that's what this red rooftop is showing here. In our discussions with the Helena Housing Authority, they would have a goal long-term to provide additional subsidized housing adjacent to the Emmy Anderson property. So that's what this is starting to indicate. Then as we move further to the north and to the west, this scheme and both schemes actually at this point in time are showing the removal of the neighborhood center. And this is predicated on the fact that there would be a new location for the neighborhood center. If the new location was not part of the plan, then this would not be done this way. But the idea here is to connect the south end of the walking mall by an extension of the walking mall and a pedestrian pathway that links up and connects to our trail system and walking paths along Cruse Avenue. And so this large, actually would be significantly large park land space now would be kind of a destination park feature on the south end of the gulch. One of the things we've been trying to do in the scheme, and it starts to hint at the development of it right here, is a plaza space, in this case on either side of the roadway, which links the fire tower and the trails that link up to the fire tower down to Anchor Park and Pioneer Park in this expanded park area. There is about a 1-story drop in elevation from Cruse Avenue and this upper plaza space down. So there would be this vista overview into the park and into Mount Helena and the whole area down here. And on the other side, what we would do is actually put a staircase that goes down to that underpass, pedestrian underpass that exists right now, but is separated from Cruse Avenue and the upper walk area. So that's what we're seeing here. As we move further north, there's a couple of logical connections. Right here is where there's a staircase and a covered walkway area that leads down, ultimately kind of gets down into the gulch. And so we're trying to make that connection there as well. One of the goals that came out of our stakeholder interviews was just any way we can improve pedestrian connectivity from the east and the residential neighborhoods to the east into the downtown would be a bonus. Right now, Cruse Avenue acts as a physical and psychological barrier to the downtown. So each one of these intersections now gets narrowed up to a 24-foot wide zone, which is much more pedestrian friendly. And that's consistent also at the primary intersections, like here, where Broadway and Cruse intersect. Anybody who's walked down Broadway and tried to cross this section here, it's incredibly wide, and you feel like you're taking your life into your own hands just to walk across that. So in the next slide, you'll see that gets narrowed up as it does on the other side. So this is where we just left off. And as we continue to move north, you can see that narrowed up crossing and much more opportunities to utilize city parking lots and repurposing portions of those or all of them for this urban transitional housing for downtown. And so starting on the south, we've got lot 6, which when we take the width of that lot and add the 25 feet of right-of-way that we can gain, is just the right about of dimension and depth that we need for fairly tight townhouse style units. Get access off of Warren Street from above into parking areas or parking garages inside the units, then with access on the west side, sort of as a front door. Then here we have another sort of access into the downtown. There actually is currently a small stair that actually leads down through this parking lot off of Warren. And so we pick up on that to have another pedestrian crossing linking to an existing pathway that actually leads down to the alley next to the Jackson Street garage, which ultimately can get across Jackson Street and into the existing current plaza that leads down into the walking mall. So increasing that east-west connectivity. Then we have are showing a couple of additional townhouse style units that take up portions of the upper Jackson Street garage lot and part of the chamber lot. On the Helena IR property, there's actually, that property has just recently been purchased, and there's a group working on renovations to that building. And they have mentioned in our stakeholder interview the idea of doing a multi-story residential unit. So we're just sort of hinting at that possibility in this. And then we've got sort of the 7th Avenue gym area, and across the street, it's sort of a, if anybody's walked along here, this is guarded by a chain link fence because the parking lot down below is about a 13 or 14 foot drop from Cruse Avenue. But what's interesting is that the views from this location into the downtown are pretty incredible. You can directly see the power block, Montana Club building, the City County building, as well as Mount Helena. And so sort of saw this as an opportunity to create another little node and a public plaza space, sort of a gathering space, and then a staircase that could lead down into that parking lot. And again, sort of provide connectivity over to Constitution Park and then into the Last Chance Gulches and the mall. Then our 25-foot zone kind of shifts to the west side of the street because of this plaza, and we sort of finish it off by intersecting Lawrence with the narrowed intersections again, and then just hinting at a possibility of a mixed-use retail commercial building that takes up a small portion of the lot behind Bert and Ernie's across from the Halter Museum as an urban infill kind of idea. So that's kind of a quick summary and description of the narrowed street option. I'll now shift to an idea that sort of was an outgrowth of our discussions in the stakeholder interviews, which is a little more of a dramatic departure from what Cruse is currently. And in this scheme, it sort of turns Cruse into a linear park for Helena. And so it would be void of any vehicular traffic except for emergency service vehicles, with the exception of maintaining a connection from Cutler over to Park, where we still do the narrowed street solution. Just in a way to sort of, anybody who comes down Park Avenue, gives them the ability to make the loop, get back up into the South Rodney corridor. So a little bit more development on the large park idea, the idea of creating an outdoor amphitheater as a performance space in this large park, more expanded pedestrian areas. This again would have an overlook into this area. can see the expansion of sort of this fire tower plaza idea that becomes kind of this node that links the fire tower to the park area. And pretty self-explanatory. The gray again is the bicycle path, and the orange sort of pedestrian zone. Another small sort of impromptu amphitheater space for smaller scale performances or dual performances. And then showing kind of opportunities to have some stairs that lead up to the trails that engage the fire tower. And so showing one on this end and showing one on this end as well. Taking that same idea and carrying it to Lawrence Street. Everything pretty much stays the same. The main difference between this and the previous scheme is just the elimination of vehicular traffic. One sort of small change, because this is parkland and there's no street access off of it. This parking lot above the Jackson Street garage would have kind of a new access right here that connects to 6th Avenue. The chamber lot is still accessed off of 6th Avenue. You can see the expansion of this plaza space across from the 7th Avenue gym, and then ending up at Lawrence. So kind of a quick overview. This is the narrowed street solution, all put together. Yep. Kind of the linear park idea. And then the last one is kind of a hybrid of the two, where from Broadway to Lawrence, we do the narrowed street solution. And from Broadway to Cutler, it maintains the linear park idea. And this was just based on, again, a couple of different data points. One is looking at the current car counts that have been documented on these stretches of road. And there's a notable difference between the number of cars that travel on Cruse south of Broadway versus the number of cars that actually utilize it from Broadway into actually Mini Malfunction Junction. And so this idea just kind of combines the two. So that's where we are at. As mentioned, none of this is set in stone in any way. This is to generate discussion, ideas, for people to comment on what they think is good or not good, or things that we could improve upon. There's been a lot of discussion the last couple of days about the neighborhood center. And the one thing I would point out is that both solutions can work either way, with the neighborhood center remaining and this park not happening, or providing a new location for the neighborhood center. So the idea of a narrowed street solution or a linear park solution can still function with the neighborhood center remaining in place. So don't want that to be kind of a diversion from the idea of what do we do with Cruse as a fundamental idea.
And I'll just add to that, Mike, if I could. One of the concepts that has been discussed is with the neighborhood center. That facility that they're in right now was built in the 1970s, so it's about 50 years old, and they have a number of facilities and operations that I think could be really better served with a new facility. And there's, park space right across from them, across the walking mall, that is, in its current configuration is not contiguous to the other park space that's kind of kitty corner to it. And so having the park space being, contiguous as being presented here increases the functionality and the connectivity And, one possibility would be to have a new facility built across from its current location with adequate parking and with, a building that's, new and designed for the services that they're providing to the community. And then in the current location, have the ability to develop this concept that's being shown here. So not really relocating, but providing a new facility, just right across from the walking mall, really keeping them in the same general area. So that would be an option. And then the other that was discussed yesterday was possibly, working with the Helena Housing Authority to have a location incorporated into this red building here. Some square footage on the ground floor and maybe some additional space in a attached building or facility. So those are two, I think, alternative locations that have been discussed to date. Again, just let everyone know it's not our intention to put the neighborhood center or the Rocky Mountain Development Center in a worse position than they are now, but to be able to enhance their services to the community. They are a very important and critical partner and provide really important services. So I think there are options that may be available that could warrant further conversation.
Yeah, I think that that's a good point. If we look at the park space, if we add a bunch of park space as we're showing here, you could logically make sense of making the neighborhood center be adjacent to the library with sort of a dedicated play area that's adjacent to it, which sort of helps all of it work together.
Yeah.
So thoughts, comments?
Mike, Liz Mogstad has a comment or question.
Okay.
For you.
Yeah, I do. So of course it's about the neighborhood center since I worked for Rocky. And my concern is not necessarily that, obviously we're not going to be without a home. I get that part. But we're kind of in this world right now where we are too big for that space. And we've been trying to figure out ways to bring us together and make that building the best it can be. And the way that we do it, obviously we don't want to spend a bunch of time and money on the current building and then have it be torn down. So it's definitely something that I think needs to be solved before you even touch the rest of the idea, and even that other space would be great, but we already don't have enough parking. So we definitely need to ensure that we have plenty of parking. We don't have anywhere close to enough parking right now. So I wish that we would have been approached before it was publicly unveiled about this, because we have internally, we're always having discussions about the building and how to fit the space. And so, and my other concern would be funding, because right now I can find about $350,000 in grant funds, which wouldn't build us a new building. And New Markets kind of works, but we'd have to raise $4 million on our own. So there's just some big red flags, I think, from being in that building that are coming from this. And I know that's not the intention. I think it's great. It's a cool idea. But it's kind of been brushed over, and we just would need to know before. We've been sinking money into this building for years. How much more do we sink in, in the next 10 if it's not going to be there? So that's the question I would have.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Liz. And I did have a call early this morning with Lori and Kathy with your organization, and we did talk about funding, and that obviously is going to be the brain damage that's incurred to try and find a solution here. But yeah, you're right. There's New Markets that may be available, but you need to have a leveraged loan and be able to find additional sources of financing to make that work. There is funding that's been made available through the CARES Act some surge funding for organizations that provide services to at-risk populations. So that might be an opportunity through CDBG funding or Economic Development Administration funding. There's also, the Urban Renewal area that's been approved and tax increment financing that could be made available in the future. So there's a number of different, I think, financing sources that could be looked at. And I think it's just going to take the community will to work together in a spirit of partnership to find a solution if the community so desires to, find a suitable spot for relocating and build a new facility.
Thanks, Adam. We've got another question or comment from Kay Robinson.
Yeah, hi. Thank you first for all the work you guys have put into this. It looks really good. I have several questions. My first is not a question though. It's that last comment about putting a building there in the park. Oh, please don't plop a building there in our pretty park. I know you're adding a park if you did that, but it's just so lovely there next to the library, and it is highly used, and it is right across from Reader's Alley, and it's just a nice location for a park. So I would hope that that wouldn't be their first choice for the neighborhood center. So my first question's for Mike. Hi, Mike. When did you do the car count? Because I know that time of year affects my usage of Cruse, and it's during the high tourist season. We don't use park a lot. We use Cruse a lot more. There's so many people down there along park walking, and mountain bike season, so many bikes. And so we do use Cruse a lot more during the summer.
I'll let Adam respond to that.
Yeah, that's a good question. So that information was actually just taken from the Department of Transportation's website. They have average daily counts that they publish on that website that we were able to access. And so that's where that information came from. When those counts were taken, I'm not sure what those dates were. And if they have stations that are continually monitoring traffic, or if those were, spot counts that were taken over a course of, a couple weeks and then averaged. So we can find out that information from the Department of Transportation.
Yeah, that would be good. We use it a lot during rush hour. It's Helena, I know, but it does get very congested there on Park with the number of lights as you hit the downtown area. And so then I can see that the option to get around that would be going up Rodney and coming down on that State Street area. I hesitate that end of Rodney, that south end of Rodney. I don't know if it could take an increase of traffic. It's also in pretty poor condition as we're coming in from work or being out. We would have to come up Rodney from Broadway and then head over down Cutler if you cut off Cruse completely. So does the city have any plans for Rodney right there? I know it's a lot of houses, May Butler Center.
Yeah, that's a good observation, and I think it is contingent upon the usage and the car counts in the area. If the numbers that we have from MDT are anywhere close to being accurate, Cutler coming up to Rodney should be able to handle that volume of traffic fairly easily. But part of the idea, I think, as well, and I think in any scenario, I think these improvements between Cruse and Rodney along Cutler should be a part of the plan, because the Urban Renewal District was extended to include the Rodney Street corridor as well. And so the idea in doing that is to provide opportunities or mechanisms that allow for these businesses along Rodney Street to expand and grow and redevelop. And so, I mean, Sharon or Mike could probably share a little bit more of the thought process of when the Urban Renewal District was expanded to include Rodney Street.
This is Sharon. The commission determined to include Rodney Street for some of the reasons you're talking about, Kay, but also because of some of the housing and to create better opportunities for housing and for the commercial area closer to the Myrna Loy and the courthouse. I do know that the city is looking at a reconstruction project on Rodney. I'm not sure of the scope of that, but that would certainly improve the condition of Rodney and a lot of that area. And I don't know how far it would be going on Cutler if it is included in that area. But I think Mike's exactly right. Part of the reason why we included Rodney area is because of its connectivity to the downtown, and because it would provide us opportunities to have some better connection between the neighborhoods to the east of the downtown into the downtown. I don't know if that helps or answers your question.
It does help to know that they've included that in the plan for Rodney to, yeah, just to include all of that together, that would help. So 2 more questions. Sorry, I don't mean to take up everyone's time. So about the housing that you spoke of, Mike. So I'm assuming how this would go would be that the city would sell, contract out, sell, and then someone would develop this housing.
So there was discussion about that, and there are some different options I think that are available. And I don't know if Mike McConnell or Adam, one of you guys, want to talk a little bit more about the opportunities to do that.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think what we've intended here is that we would have the private sector involved in developing out each of the townhomes that are presented here, and with the city being able to kind of set the parameters of what the targeted demographic would look like for those. And there are a couple of things that they could do. You know, one would be just to sell the property to the private sector and allow market forces just to dictate what type of product and quality would be developed in those townhomes. The other would be to, and this was something that was brought up yesterday, would be like a land trust model, where there were some, limitations or CC&Rs or deed restrictions that were placed on the property. And in some communities will actually put a lien on the property as well that would restrict or provide penalties, restrict the housing to a certain income bracket. And if the homes were sold to a family that did not meet those restrictions, then there would be some penalty associated with that. And so there are some ways in which a land trust model could be looked at to create parameters where you have some limitations in terms of affordability and attainable housing. So I think those are still options and mechanisms that we can continue to pursue and discuss.
Okay, that actually was what I wrote down. Like, what would the limits or parameters be on the housing? What would it look like? Would it, a lot of people are doing a good job now of making the housing not look like ticky-tacky boxes in a row, but make it, if we're gonna develop the downtown area and attract some young professionals, then obviously we want it to look nice and not just an ugly row of boxes. And speaking to that, if you looked down at the bottom where Cruse meets Park, would there be any way to keep a bit of that as a tiny green space there at the bottom? Because I see in your picture it looks like that, but obviously if we put that up for development, they're not going to follow that. So I like
think we can dictate what happens there. I talked a little bit about this in one of the meetings yesterday, that I kind of intentionally did not show the townhouses extending further than what I did, so that we had still a park down here at this end. The Claim Stake apartment, one of the gentlemen yesterday lives in Claim Stake, and he was talking about how that space does get used.
Yeah, it does.
And so I think maintaining a park in that area is appropriate. So we just would make it a city park.
Yeah, that bit of green space does get used a lot, but then it kind of offsets the giant parking lot to the north. And then the same with the park next to the library. Again, it offsets building, giant parking lot as you're going down Park. So yeah, it would be nice to keep a bit of green space there and not let someone put another parking lot for all those townhouses.
Yeah. Good comments.
Thank you guys for all the work you've put into this.
Thank you.
Mike, it looks like we've got Christy Pinozzo with City Parks. That's a question or comment.
Hi, this is Christy Pinozzo. I'm the Parks Director for the city, and great work on this. I just have a couple of comments, and I'll start with, and maybe I just missed this, but in any of your designs, do you have sort of integration of the fire tower park, either like by a trail or just in general design? Are you guys looking at that?
We have been, haven't gone into the details of it yet, but the topography is certainly a challenge along Cruse Avenue where the fire tower park is, but there are some trails that people have been developing that lead to it that I think we want to make connections to. And two of them that I've noted is this one that sort of comes down this ridge behind the Bluestone House. And I think there's an opportunity for us as a part of this project to get that kick started down where it meets Cruse, either with a set of stairs or a combination of stairs that get partway up that before it becomes a more manageable trail. And then as you head directly north, you can walk along the current park that's up there, which is kind of a little hidden gem. And there's a trail that leads right down in front of the state parking garage, where I think there's another opportunity for us to introduce sort of the beginning of some stairs that might lead up to that area. So that's as far as we've sort of looked at it so far.
Great. Yeah, I would just encourage sort of just what you were talking about, having some integration of access up to Fire Tower Park and what that might look like. And then the amphitheaters that I think are in, I can't remember, they were in a couple of the different designs. Yep. Do you have capacity for what those amphitheaters might hold?
I think that would be a community discussion we need to have. I think they can be as small and intimate as we want them to be, or fairly significant. What I've been trying to do is put them in locations where we've got natural topography that, would be almost like Greek style amphitheaters where they're built into the side of a hill. and you get sort of that natural acoustical effect of it. But no, we haven't done capacity yet. I think that would be a discussion we should have with Grand Street Theater and some of the other organizations that might take advantage of it.
Yeah, I would encourage that. We've been talking with Grand Street Theater a lot recently about having some of their plays outdoors this summer in our parks, and that's one thing that they have come to us with, is some of the places that we do have are not terribly conducive to a play type situation. Either it's an area that's too loud, or there's just not enough room. So, I think those are great. I would work with those kind of organizations to try to see what would fit their needs. And then the other comment I had is just, this is probably a significant addition of green space to parks maintenance. A lot of these are, which is great. We'd love to see. I'd love to see worked into the design either what the sort of alternative irrigation potentially, whether that's a well, so that we're not irrigating with treated water, or other alternative irrigation, rain collection, or native grasses worked into the final design.
Yeah, those are great ideas. I couldn't agree more.
And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Christy.
Looks
I'm
like,
Mike Seth Brandenberger.
Go ahead, Seth.
Okay, I had a couple comments on the designs. I guess starting at the top, you've got in what we're looking at right now, you've got a like a red shaded area between right north of the federal building.
Right.
What's that?
We just popped that in this morning as sort of in reaction to us obliterating the neighborhood center in this idea that, if we're going to introduce all this new parkland, would it make any sense at all? And I think it may have come out of some discussions this morning that Adam had with some of the staff of RMDC, of relocating their building to this location. And as Kay was mentioning, please don't put a new building or any kind of building in that great park space. So it's all very fluid right now, but that's what that was showing.
I see. Okay. Well, the one thing I'd like to say is that, yeah, the one thing about it is that park is across from Reader's access there, but the federal building is such an albatross and actually shades that park, and that park is so cold in the wintertime, it's pretty much useless. It's kind of funny that the federal building is so misplaced in the whole scheme of things. It's like right in the middle, and all that huge parking lot gets the sunlight, and it's virtually unused. So, but I know we're not addressing that. The entrance directions on that, and it's not a good situation. A couple other things on the amphitheaters. It seems like, we've got, if we put amphitheaters up here, we've still got Memorial Park, and we've got the Women's Park. And are these going to replace that, or it just seems like all of a sudden we got an awful lot of amphitheaters. So I'd like to make that a comment. And then I'd like to look down by 6th Avenue. The scenarios we've got there, if we could, yeah. If we look at the Jackson Street parking garage, that trail that connects down to the south of the Jackson Street parking garage, I mean, that's currently an entrance to the garage. I'm not sure how that would be, I'm not sure how that would work, because that other scenario, yeah, anyway, I just think that's kind of a,
Seth, you're kind of cutting in and out there a little bit.
I think the comments are, I mean, definitely duly noted. And, you know, I even recognize that this service drive right here, you know, also serves the back of the Algeria Shrine building as well. So there's definitely some logistics that need to be coordinated. And it may well be that this becomes less park-like and more service drive. But I think there are ways to do that and still have this sort of pedestrian connection and have that shared safe access for everybody.
Great. It looks like Kathy Macefield has a couple questions for you. Kathy, go ahead.
Yeah, I do. I was wondering if there's going to be any changes to that park where the thought was expanding the neighborhood center, but now it looks like we're not expanding it there. But anyway, because you've got mature trees in there, and what happens oftentimes when you redevelop something, then you don't get trees of the same stature. I mean, you get little saplings, and then you have to start all over in the growing. So that would definitely be a big trade-off. Also, there is a sculpture, a public art piece in that particular park, and now, and I was just wondering what would happen to that. So that would be something to think about. I have a series of questions, sorry. Could you show where Dale Harris Park is on the south side of Cruse, on the east side of Cruse? It's got a trail that goes up it.
I have to admit, I don't know where Dale Harris Park is.
Okay.
So get me oriented there.
It's between Cutler and Park on the east side. There's some rock wall that goes along it.
So in this area?
Trail. Okay, now I'm kind of lost here.
This is Cutler.
Mike, I believe it's a little bit farther south of that where those trails are.
Right, go south of Cutler. And it looks like there is a little trail that goes off. And if I could show you with my cursor, but there, I can see it now. Keep going to the left. No, keep going to the left. I know you're trying to grab. Do you have a cursor?
Yeah, can you see the hand?
Yeah. Go to the left with it. Whoops, you went too far. Right there, drop right at the bottom of the hand. That's it. It's Dale Harris Park. The trail goes up to it.
Gotcha.
Okay. And so I was trying to tell where you were showing potential housing. If that was going to conflict with that. So anyway, it's something to think about. Okay, there it is. There it is.
Yep.
Okay. I think anytime we start building up into the hillside, we need to really be careful about what that's going to look like afterwards in terms of the scarring. I mean, you can see it at the base of Fire Tower Hill, you know, and what it looks like. And so just wondering, and there you go. And so just wondering if there would be, you want to have good erosion control measures afterwards. You don't want to have another scar into the hillside. So something to think about when you're putting housing on that side. I'm curious why you did mention on the other side of the street and going over the parking lot with some housing, but why that idea is not carried out throughout, going over the existing parking with existing, so that tuck under, so that you could have some more housing along Cruse Avenue on the west side. So that's something to think about. And Kate kind of talked about design standards, but I didn't hear anything about design standards on what these townhouses would look like. I think you want to take real care on what they look like, and so that there needs to be some kind of controls in place, whether it's actual design review process, or if developers are going to build, that they have to build to certain standards in terms of, you don't want to have, I think you're envisioning narrow sized townhouses. And so you don't want a developer to come in and build one that might be a single unit that might encompass 3 spaces instead of getting your 3 narrow ones in. I mean, you want something that fits the scale and fits the mass and works in that area. So anyway, I was just wondering why the townhouse concept was not extended farther north that would be from 6th to actually from the neighborhood center all the way, instead of all the green space. I mean, green space is nice, but I mean, I'm wondering why there isn't some housing over the parking lot for tuck under. So, and then I have some concerns about blocking off Cruse Avenue from Park all the way to 6th. To Broadway, rather. And what that will do, even though Cutler might be open, and I'm not sure what grade that would be, but what that would do is direct non-residential traffic up into the established residential neighborhood on Rodney Street. And I think that would be a concern for the established residential neighborhood. And I'm just looking at the little park area thing that you were talking about, keeping at the end of where Cruse Avenue joins. Yeah, right there. All those little park areas would still be maintained by the Parks Department? That's a question. I know doing all that maintenance of the postage stamp areas has been a challenge sometimes for the Parks Department. And so what Christy's thoughts on that would be, you know, something to consider. And I guess the next question is, where does the process go from here? I know you've got another one of these this afternoon, and then you're going to take the concepts and the comments from people, and then it'll come back out for another public comment, or what will be the process? Thank you. That's all my questions.
Yeah, so thank you for those comments. I think in terms of the housing, we can maybe start there. We did look originally, and we had some preliminary sketches and concepts about including more housing over parking lots throughout to try and create more of a streetscape and a sense of neighborhood and community along Cruse. But what we found was in certain areas, the topography was really challenging in terms of the elevation grade between Cruse and those parking lots that would be difficult and a challenge to overcome from a development perspective. The utilization of the parking lots themselves, we tried to focus on those lots that where we had data that showed that there was underutilization, and that's why you see those townhomes where you do. And you know, the other was just the ability to you know, create a inviting product, you know, and something that would be, I think, welcomed by home buyers in the market. And I think one of the challenges that we had that we wanted to consider was, you know, of all those variables, you know, you have at Fire Tower Park, you have this very sterile hillside where we're not able to really do much of anything other than you know, some landscaping improvements, and having product across the street along Wong, you know, looking out at that sterile hillside, we just didn't think would be really amenable to the type of neighborhood feel that we were trying to create. So there were a lot of considerations that we looked at as we were trying to site housing, and there are just a lot of challenges along Cruse in terms of topography, parking lot utilization, and just the general aesthetics of the project. Dale Harris Park, Mike, I don't believe Dale Harris Park would be impacted with where you've cited those townhomes. I believe those are in the existing right-of-way. Is that an accurate statement?
You know, it is, although, you know, it would be now sort of behind units, which is going to change the feel of it. So it is definitely something to take into consideration as we look at how those units are placed and how far. Yeah, it's Kathy's point is a good one to at least consider and see what the impact is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Trying to remember, I wrote down notes on this, but there's one more comment. Kathy, what was your last comment that you had made? Sorry.
About design standards or parks maintenance of the little spaces.
Oh yeah, the
non-residential
design standards.
traffic,
I'm sorry, what was that last one?
or redirecting non-residential traffic through the neighborhood on Rodney. I
Oh,
have
sure.
several
Yeah.
comments.
Yeah. So I think that would certainly be something. And I know, Mike, you'd already touched on this earlier, but you know, the impact to Rodney Street and what that would look like would obviously have to be something that the city would consider if Cruse Avenue were to be closed. And I don't think that's the direction that this is going towards based on the feedback that's been received so far. I think it's been pretty consistent that to date, the feedback has been really favored towards option one with the narrowed street rather than closing Cruse. So I don't believe that would be a direction that we'd be going in as a recommendation at this point. The design standards, I think absolutely we want something that's going to be architecturally congruent with the feel of the downtown and the adjacent neighborhoods. And, you know, certainly the city can, you know, because it is city property where these townhomes would be developed in many cases, they'd be able to put in those, you know, design standards, whether they're CC&Rs that run with the land or deed restrictions or something in terms of a development agreement. I think those would certainly be considerations that the city and controls that the city could put in place for that. The very great comments. So the process, thank you, Ryan, for that. That was the one I was thinking of, was where does the process go from here? So we'll have a wrap up. We'll have one more small group session this afternoon at 2 o'clock. And then we'll have a wrap up session starting at 5:30 tonight, where we'll share the feedback and input that's been received from the community, which will, point towards really the development of a preferred alternative based on community input. And, in a couple weeks, we'll have another public meeting where we'll present that preferred alternative and have additional public comment available after that, and refine that alternative some more. And I think at that point, we'll be prepared to provide that final deliverable to the city. And so we're really excited about this. We're going to take everything that we've learned and that we've heard from these meetings, we'll incorporate it into the plan and do our best to reflect the goals and objectives of the community, and do another round of comments. And at that point, we'll provide that final deliverable. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, great. This has been really wonderful. We want to thank you guys for participating, for providing your comments, your concerns, your ideas. This has been really great for us, and we can take those and refine these concepts and have something that we hope is reflective of what the community would like to see here. And I think Cruse Avenue represents a really great opportunity. And we thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll see you again later this afternoon at 5:30.
Yeah, thanks everybody.